Hi guys, it's Kathy Heller. Welcome to the 5-Day Songwriting Challenge. I've been so excited about this. My team has been so excited about this. It's been fun to get to know some of you as you've been introducing yourself. So I can't wait to get to know you better, and we're gonna have so much fun over the next 5 days. I know I'm gonna have fun because I love doing this work. So as we're getting started, just giving people a chance to sign on, will you just go in the chat and let me know a couple things? I want to know where you're watching from. I'd love to know what you consider yourself. Do you consider yourself an artist, a producer? Do you consider yourself both? And the last question is, I'd love to know how much do you feel you already know about music licensing? Do you feel like you know a lot? Do you feel like you're just beginning? Do you feel like this is something you've been doing for a long time? You just wanted sort of a refresher? But I'd love to hear from you where you're at, and I'd love to hear from you just how much you feel you already know on this topic, just so we can get a sense of who's here. And it would be really fun to hear what city you're watching from. So just as you're signing on and everybody's getting comfortable and finding out that we're live, just let us know what city you're in. Let us know how much you know about music licensing. And yeah, I'm just going to start reading through the comments. So also my team is in the chat. You're going to get to hear from them. But Angela is my director of operations, and she's awesome. One of the best human beings I know. So she's there to support you. So I'm just reading through this. And some of the artists that I've been working with over the last several years are here. So hi, Amira. And so Samantha's in Austin, Texas. She's a singer-songwriter. Awesome. If you're just signing on, let me know. What is it that you consider yourself? Are you a singer-songwriter? Are you a producer? Do you do both? Do you just do lyrics? Do you do lyrics and melody? Just want to know, get a sense of who's here and what you guys feel is your, what do you identify most with? And let us know what city you're in. Awesome. Cool. Heather's here, Livette's here, Tom's here. Hi guys, Herman's here. He's in Kansas City. That's so fun. Awesome. Shauna's here from Montreal, Canada. She says, I know nada, but feeling drawn to it, curious about possibilities. So cool. John's here. Greetings from New York City. Awesome. I'm originally from New York, good place to be from. He said, I'm a singer-songwriter, recently just graduated audio school to finish filling in my knowledge about home producing. Very cool. I know close to nothing about music licensing. Great. So we're going to go over all that stuff today and over the next 5 days. Hollywood, Florida. I am originally from New York, but then spent a good deal of my childhood in Florida. Julia says, just moved to LA. I'm a Berkeley grad, so you know a lot. Super smart, I'm sure, super talented. Singer-songwriter, awesome. Sam's here. Sam, how many of these have you done? You are such a soldier. Sam's just super talented guy. Recently got a bunch of placements. Been so cool to see that starting to come together for you, but you've been so generous with so many of the other artists in our community. Katie's here, singer-songwriter, awesome. Love it. So, okay, I'm going to go back and read all of these comments. So if I didn't get to you in this second, don't you worry. I'm just going to look through this. Framingham, Massachusetts, so cool. I did a theater arts program there every summer during high school. It was the best summers of my life. So cool. Someone's here from Mexico. New Zealand, Chris. Chris, you get the prize. He is watching from New Zealand. Can anyone beat that? Juliet is here from Atlanta. So fun. Awesome. Trenton, Texas, singer-songwriter, know very little about licensing. Great, we're gonna talk about it today. Andrew says, I'm in Reading, Connecticut. I love Connecticut very, very much. Thought about moving there, actually. Haley, is it Haley or Hallie? I should know this. Artist from St. Louis. Let's see. Awesome. Latasha's from Chicago. Chicago, super good people. James is here. What's up, James? James is like, you don't need to be here. James runs a licensing agency, super sweet guy, used to rep my music. I just saw Gary Calamar. He was at my event this past week. Such an awesome human being, great team. So cool. Look at all of these. This is why I do this. Okay. How lucky am I? This is what I get to do. I get to show up and then meet all of these incredible artists who I probably would never have met because you live all over the world, and we get to hang out for 5 days. So I'm really excited to hang with you guys. And let me tell you what's going to happen. So over the next 5 days, we have 5 days. So if we don't cover everything today, I just want you to feel like, I don't get it. I was wanting to hear this or that. we have 5 days together and I don't hold back. I know there's a lot of interesting kinds of human beings in the world, on the internet, all that stuff. You're going to get to know me pretty quickly, but I just don't hold back. So anyone who's been in my challenge, you're going to see that I'm going to teach you everything I know and not going to leave anything on the table. So over the course of the week, you will hopefully get your questions answered. So today we're going to start out with an overview of how I feel you can best think about making it in this business. What is the strategy that worked for me? What's the strategy that I've taught to other artists that have helped them actually get the results that they want to see? And we're going to talk about what this even looks like, because we have to define our terms, right? There's a lot of people who have different ideas. Like some people think that I write jingles. Never written a jingle in my life, right? So we want to just explain it and understand it. Like, Cass, do you sit down and write 30-second cues? No, I don't. But I know some people do that, right? And that's a different thing. You know, that's something that's separate from music licensing. I would say that those people might work at music houses and they might be on salary to pump those things out. And I think in the past, in the 80s, you know, we had Like a Good Neighbor, State Farm is there, or there were lots of jingles. In fact, Barry Manilow wrote a lot of those jingles, which is pretty awesome. But you deserve a break today, right? So no, that's not what we do. We don't write jingles. So if we talk about my songs or any of the artists I've worked with, if we talk about those songs being used in a TV show or an ad or a trailer, we're talking about full-length songs. We're talking about songs that would be on this artist's album, songs that they like singing in their shows, songs that they're proud of, that then get cut to picture. And it's up to then the producer and director to decide how much of the song they want to use, if they want to cut out lyrical parts and just leave in the instrumental or bring the lyrics back to really help tell the story. So we're going to talk about that later, but we are going to make sure that you walk away today with a really good working understanding of what music licensing is, what my journey has been like, and what I feel like are the most essential pieces that actually have created the success that I have. Just for some context, I'm in my office, and behind me on the wall, my husband was very kind over the years. He framed these, and I keep them in my office as opposed to in the living room because it'd be a little ridiculous for people to come in and see me all over the living room walls. But these are articles about my success, which was such a really cool thing. In fact, this Billboard article, which is in the center here, the day it came out on newsstands, I was 8.5 months pregnant and very, very overweight for good reason. And I remember going to the newsstand, very humbling experience. And I was so excited for this issue to come out. And of course, I knew exactly what day it would come out on the stands. And I picked up a copy of it and I opened to this page and I was crying. I just couldn't believe that I was there, a full page story about me in Billboard. And I was crying and I was looking at the guy who was selling me the magazine, and he was like, what's going on? Why are you so emotional? And I was like, because I'm in this magazine. He goes, that's you? That doesn't look like you. Because I was so overweight. So it is nice because I'm still, like everybody else, a person who struggles with my own self-doubt, anxiety. I have 3 children. It feels good. And I'm grateful to him for having framed these articles so that once in a while, sitting in my office and I look over and I was like, you know, Cass, maybe you should feel good about the things that you do, right? So the reason I'm pointing that out is because sometimes we're listening to people and we're not sure, like, do they have any expertise? Do they have any authority? Do they know what they're talking about? So if you want to do some digging, you want to do some Googling, you can find some paper trail, right? It's nice to know, it's nice to see it in print because journalists have to verify facts and they have to get quotes from people. And so what's nice about these articles is they have quoted music supervisors who work not just on the ad side, but also in the film and TV side. In fact, John Houlihan is quoted in this Variety article. John used to be president of the Music Supervision Guild, and now he actually works in-house at Fox. And so he was quoted, as well as Frankie Pine and many other music supervisors. So it gives you a sense of like, who the heck is this woman? So I want to tell you all the things that we need to get to today. And I'm going to start with the very most important thing, which is I totally see you and get it. Okay. I totally understand. And you're gonna be like, what does she understand? So I feel like I have like almost too much empathy, if that's possible. But I grew up just like every other kid, dealing with my own stuff in my own house. My mom was actually manic depressive. My parents got divorced. My dad walked out, never came back, which is a likely story. And it was kind of a difficult time. My mom was actually pretty suicidal when I was growing up, which was really, really awful. But the good part of it, I guess, the silver lining part of it is that I knew what it felt like to hurt. And I not only felt things myself, of course, as the child of all of that chaos, but I was really there to be a stand for her. And I watched her dealing with depression, which gave me a really good look at what it means for people to feel like they lost their reason to get up in the morning. And so every time I meet anyone, whether it's my Uber driver, a waiter, a new friend, a neighbor, I don't have to know details to know they've been through a lot. I know that every person has had their heart broken. I know that every person has been through tons of loss and like huge grief and challenges. And I know that you're all winning silent battles that you don't tell everybody about, but that you're going through. So because I know that, I just want you to know that I get it. And the other thing that I also get is that I was a kid who felt really creative and had this dream my whole life. Like it would just like light me up like electricity when I would think about one day getting so far from where I lived and being on a stage and writing songs that I wrote. And that dream got me through such painful moments, the idea of it, just the smell of it, just the taste of that being a possibility. And like so many people, I was told, you need to let that go. You know, when you grow up, you're not going to be doing that. It's not realistic. It's not practical. Those things don't happen. Artists are starving. And I actually read an article recently that was talking about how in the musical Rent, which is based on the opera La Boheme, that's really that opera, and which is actually based on a story, really characterized artists as starving. And it became sort of just synonymous, like artists starve. We're gonna talk about that later. But I was told, don't do that, do something, get a real job one day. And when I was in college, having barely graduated from high school, really, literally, I found out the last day of senior year that I was gonna graduate because I'd really not really shown up so much for high school. I was dealing with so much at home. And when I graduated from college, my friends were going to law school and my friends were going to go get a master's in something. I was like, I just want to write music, but nobody handed me a path. Nobody said, oh, this is what you're going to do. And so I came out to LA and I was like, okay, so where do I get the record deal? Who shows me how to do that? And I got a job off of Craigslist. I was an assistant in an office and I found a roommate and she was a waitress and we were both just like living the dream. And it took me a few years to figure out, okay, how would I reverse engineer? We'll talk about that later too. How would I reverse engineer how to get a record deal? And I found out through tons of different meetings and contacts and researching, in order to even try to get a record deal, you would need to present an A&R person or to see an A&R person at an event that you're performing at or to deliver them some kind of demo. Like essentially you need songs that are recorded and then possibly if they're good enough, you're going to get there. And so I worked tirelessly. I spent all the money I made at my day job to help me make a demo. And first the songs were bad and then they were better and then they were a little bit better. And it finally actually happened that 3 years later, I was offered a record deal and I was sitting, no joke, this is a real story. I was signed to Interscope for a few months. Ron Fair was my producer. I remember having lunch with him alone, just me and him at the Ivy. And I remember when we left, he was like, I'll drive you to your car. And I didn't know how to say like, no, it's okay, because I was so intimidated. So I was like, sure. And I got in because his car rolls up at the valet and he drops me off, except my car was literally 3 cars in front of us. So I was like, it smells like such. I was like, it's actually right here. It was like around the corner. I had gotten a really good spot, just like literally around the corner of the valet. Funny moment. Anyway, so I was signed to Interscope, and the story that I told you before, can't believe it's truly real, but I was signed to Interscope, and I remember being at the recording studio when Lady Gaga was recording Paparazzi. And I couldn't believe. I was like, they're asking me what kind of coffee I want. They're doing a coffee run. I'm like, what's happening right now? Like it's happening. I felt like I had arrived. I felt like I was in the Emerald City. And I felt like all those years when I felt so invisible as a kid because my parents were so consumed with their own stuff and I was never the cool girl in high school or any of that. I felt like this is my moment and this is what I knew would happen and I'm here. And 3 months later, I was driving in my little blue Saab, and I don't think they even make Saabs anymore. I was driving in my little car, and Ron calls me, and he said, "Are you driving?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Can you just pull over? Because I want to talk to you about something important." I was like, "Oh, this can't be great, you know?" And he said, "Jimmy Iovine wants to drop you from the record label because we're just not certain that you're going to actually be able to sell records. Like it's not a done deal. It's not like so clear. So I wish you lots of luck and drive safe." And I'm like, okay, like it's over. And at that point, and I don't know if you've experienced this as an artist, but I think a lot of us feel like it's either Beyonce or bust. It's either you're Taylor Swift and you're playing you're playing stadium tours, or you're not. Like, I don't think I did not know any other way. No one had ever mentioned to me. I had never seen it modeled. It was like, oh, if you want to be a dentist, if you want to, be a dentist, you open a dental practice or work for one. If you want to be a lawyer, you either work in-house at some company doing contracts, or you go, like Law and Order, stand in front of a jury. And if you want to be a songwriter, you got to be famous. Like, I didn't know there was anything else available. And so what we're going to also talk about through the course of the 5 days is that things are built twice, right? You build things first in your mind, and then you actually build them, right? Like if you're going to decorate your home or even build a house, forget even decorate, like you see it just like a patch of land. First, you build it here, you see what's possible. And then you're like, all right, I'm going to hire an architect and discuss this with him or her, and we're going to draw out what I want. And then your picture in here, what you built in here, you just start to bring it to life. But all I saw up here was it's all or nothing. So when he said no to me, I was like, oh, I guess this is the end. And what's amazing is that I actually had such will. My husband says I have the will of a small country, that I actually thought, wait, no, like if I get dropped from that label, but he believed in me, there'll be another label. And so I worked super hard to do it again. And I met Craig Kalman, who I actually just had lunch with a few months ago, who was president of Atlantic. And I got another record deal. And I was like, oh, so I'm really just supposed to be here. Atlantic makes much more sense for me. Like all these cool artists were on Atlantic. I was like, yeah, this is my place. And then I got dropped from Atlantic. So that's when I just didn't have anything left in the tank. I just had no more courage and no more belief, and I was just done. And I didn't have parents to call, right? Emotionally, they weren't able to be there for me. Financially, nobody was able to be there. And I just couldn't. I just took too many hits to the jaw, and it was too much disappointment, and I just broke. And actually, I think it takes tremendous courage to even want things. I think that when we were kids, we've all been disappointed so much that we come up with this really amazing strategy, which is we tell ourselves, I know what I'm going to do. I won't want anything, because if I don't want it, I'll never get rejected. And so we actually lie to ourselves and we tell ourselves, I don't really need to be in a relationship. I'm okay. I'm fine. I'm actually better. I'm happier this way. Maybe somebody broke your heart. Maybe your dad walked out. Maybe the boy in senior year who you loved, who didn't realize like how much you needed him at the time, like broke you. Maybe that's it. And maybe it's the same thing with our art. We all reach out as little kids. We're totally unabashedly ourselves, and it's beautiful. Like you never walk into a preschool and see a child who doesn't love to paint, who doesn't love to dance. They don't notice if they're good or not. It's not about being good. They just want to be. And then sadly, something happens along the way. Maybe they're 6, maybe they're 4.5, maybe they're 12. And someone says, that was horrible. I can't believe you wrote that. I can't believe you got up to the talent show and did that. You were off key. Or you're in the talent show and you do a good job, and then these 3 girls hate you because they're jealous and they spread a rumor about you and you never sing again, which happened to me in 7th grade. And then all through high school, I was like pretty much quiet because I was like, oh, I can't believe I did that. I'm so embarrassed. And I just kind of kept to myself. So it's really vulnerable, being an artist, really vulnerable. It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage to be any human being, just to want things. So for me, I was done. So I gave up. And I was like, okay, I guess this is the moment that everybody told me would happen, where I'd have to give up and go become an adult and get a real job. And so I did. And I started gaining weight. I started to become like miserable. And I was like, okay, what am I going to do? So I did so many things, you guys. I felt like Barbie. You know, there's like astronaut Barbie, vet Barbie. She wears different outfits. I was like, literally, I was like, I did everything. I worked in an interior design office because I thought, oh, well, maybe I'll just also do something creative, as if every other creative pursuit you didn't have to be as good at. So I could just do that. But it turns out you need to know math, and I wasn't good at that. Then I worked for a nonprofit because I thought, oh, if I can't do that, then what I'll do is I'll help people. Except that it was the most, I don't know how much you guys know about nonprofits, but sadly, usually the nonprofit is beautiful, but the organization is so neurotic. Like people just, there's so much politicking and it's like not run well. So that was so stressful. I did so many things, just a round of things. And then I actually got a job working in casting. A friend of mine was like, oh, maybe you'll like it. Come work in casting. And I remember working on the ABC lot. And I was like, I'm on the wrong side of this position. Like I should be working, doing music for the show, not sitting here. And anyway, so a few years are going by, and then a friend says to me, oh, I know a guy in Brentwood who's a multimillionaire. He sells commercial real estate. And I'm like, great. So why are you calling me? Because I don't know what a cap rate is. I don't know what a mortgage percentage. I don't know anything. He's like, yeah, but you have a great personality, and he's looking for someone to just work 5 hours a day. And he's got so much money. Like maybe you could work for him and then pursue your job after work. I'm like, okay, like your dream or whatever. I'm like, all right. Anyway, I wound up working for this guy who sold these big, he basically bought $300 million like retail, like he just bought these like shopping malls, and then he would break them up into pieces and sell them, which was the furthest thing from me. And yet he led me to something that wound up being so good for me looking back, which is he had me make tons of phone calls to investors who were looking to diversify their assets, which again meant nothing to me, except basically he said, here's a list of paper with a bunch of phone numbers, set up lunches for us to go on together and just get meetings for me. And I was like, okay. And so I did that. Anyway, I actually was making some money. And then about a year and a half into that, I couldn't believe that that was my life. It was ridiculous. And I pulled over on the side of the road because everything happens in LA in the car because there's so much traffic. I pulled over, I was in the car, I was crying. And I thought, I didn't like get through what I got through in life to grow up and be a person who has a job, goes home and reads People magazine and watches Law and Order and goes to bed. Like I cannot do this. And especially after everything I had been through, one thing that and you'll hear me say a few things that you're like, that makes sense. One of the biggest things that ever made sense to me in my life is that I realized that for my mom, her depression, it was not actually a lack of happiness, even though there was definitely a lack of happiness. I felt like the opposite of depression wasn't happiness. It was like purpose. It was like living life on your terms. I felt like she didn't feel like herself. And it's a long story, but she was an artist and she had given up before she had kids. She made that choice as if there's all these myths. I'm either a parent, I either get to be a mom or I get to be an artist. Like, no, I have 3 little kids. No one's saying anything is easy, but you choose which path, right? It's all going to be an interesting obstacle course. But she had given that up, and I could see how her giving up on herself, on her music, was really deep down more painful to her than anything else. So I'm like, I'm not going to give this up. So I decided I'm going to look into what else could I do. And I read an article about music licensing, and I never heard that before. And I read this article, and it was like, again, remember I told you that you either can see it or you can't. And I had given up because I couldn't see any other way. So when I read this article, it was like, it lit a path for me. It was like, picture a dark, stormy night, and then there's a lightning bolt, and you can see 5 feet ahead of you, and you're like, oh, I can see now. I can see beyond the rain, right? So it like lit a path, and I was like, I never thought about licensing music. No one ever shared that with me. And this article was great because it was specifically talking about indie artists who had licensed their music to Old Navy ads and Tropicana and shows like One Tree Hill and Dawson's Creek. And I was like, oh, wow, these aren't even label artists. So that's interesting. So I thought to myself, what if I just really pursued that and put everything I had into that? Because I had done that before with a label, and that seemed the label thing seemed harder. So I was like, let me give this a try. And so I opened up a big legal pad, And I just wrote down, okay, because I just read a Stephen Covey book, and he talks about the 7 habits of highly successful people. And he says, begin with the end in mind. So I wrote down, okay, what's the end goal? And I wrote at the top of the legal pad, okay, I want to license my song to film and TV. I was like, okay, so what do I need to do that? I was like, well, I need to get my music to people who choose music for TV shows and ads. And okay, so then I need the right songs. Okay, so what songs do I send? And then I start looking, is there anything I already have that I could send? Well, how do I know? Well, I guess I should look at what music they're using. Well, I guess I should try to think about what songs to write, or where do I begin? I just started to do a lot of that. And it didn't happen overnight. It was like, I just remember going to the studio that first day after having not been in the studio for a few years. And I just remember coming home, and I think the song we wrote was so bad and really mediocre, but I came home and I just cried such happy tears that I just felt like myself. I quit the job at the real estate agency, and I had gone to the studio that first day out, and I came home and I just felt like, oh, I recognized this girl in the mirror, like she's back. And I don't know about you guys, but you know, you can lose other people's friendship or respect or whatever, and it's not fun and it hurts. But when you lose yourself and you don't feel like yourself, and you feel like you're living someone else's life or someone else's truth, and you're not in alignment, you just know it. It feels awful. Like I used to, when I had those other jobs, I dressed differently. Like I never owned a pair of high heels, and all of a sudden I did. I never owned a suit or a sports coat. All of a sudden I did. I didn't like that person. I didn't know her. She was totally a fine character, but I felt like I was playing a character. So I started to write music, and it wasn't all great at first. And I started trying to figure out, okay, who are the music supervisors? I didn't even know that word yet. I had to like IMDb and find out what they were called. I was like, oh, so who would the music supervisor be for this show I like? Who's the music supervisor for Grey's Anatomy? I started making lists. And then I started to research, how would I find them online? And thank goodness, because of the online situation, it wasn't this way 20, 30 years ago, but I could find a lot of these people. They had contact information. A lot of these people are hired by ABC. Like they're like these little shops, these music supervision shops, like Format, Full Pursuit, Chop Shop. They have their own, so I could find them. But then the question was, what am I going to send? You know, like it has to be great. And that was a huge breakthrough for me. That was a huge breakthrough. We're going to talk about that in detail today, what I actually sent and how I actually got through to them. But essentially within a year and a half, I got my very first license, and it was for Kodak. Kodak, I don't even think is around anymore. Is it? I don't know. It was $25,000, you guys. And I cried my eyes out. And then in that after that first one happened, I got 11 in a row. American Airlines, Champion Sportswear, Legally Blonde 2 or 3, forget which one. I did a series of NBC promos and ABC promos. I wrote for Scrubs. I had one of my songs was in the series finale, not just series finale of One Tree Hill. There was a show on ABC called Body of Proof. It was just like one after the other, all different songs, TV, film, ads. It was just like boom. And I was like, oh, okay. I think I found a new way. And that was working. And then it just kept growing from there. And then I did other stuff. I had a song of mine in a movie with Jake Gyllenhaal called Southpaw. I had a song, I wrote music for Pretty Little Liars. I did songs for Walmart, McDonald's, Kellogg's, Crate and Barrel, Keurig Coffee. I had a song of mine, which was the song for the Rio Olympics, which was huge. Just to see like Michael Phelps like win an award and your song comes on I could cry like thinking about that. And then I wrote theme songs. I wrote a theme song for a Netflix show that I also got to sing. I wrote a theme song for a Nickelodeon show. I wrote songs for the American Girl movies, which seemed at the time like, who cares? But then I wound up having 3 kids. And so it was really cool a few years later when my kids were old enough to watch these movies, or we go into the store and they're playing these songs. And I feel bad for the people who work there because they play the same 10 songs over and over. Sometimes I'll say, that song, that's me. And like, that's you. And I'm like, I think it's funny that they think I'm so cool. So yeah, it really worked out. And then 2011, LA Weekly wrote an article about me. And then I think 2013 was the Billboard article. 2015, there was an article in Variety, Music Connection. I was on the cover of the USA Today music section. And then the next thing that happened was I started to be asked to speak. So I would speak at the Billboard Film and TV conference about licensing. I would speak at UCLA. I flew to Berkeley and spoke. I got to meet lots of artists, and I never thought, you guys, in a million years that I would open an agency and help artists, or that I would teach other artists. To me, it was all about, being Carole King and Shania Twain and Sheryl Crow. I never thought about this other piece. And so the opportunity just kept knocking, and I just kept saying, no, thanks, but no. And people kept saying, can you open an agency? You know so many people now and you have such great relationships. And I'm like, no, I don't do that. But like, you should talk to so-and-so. And then eventually I thought, I guess I should do that. And so in 2014, my grandma, who was like my rock during my parents' difficult marriage and divorce and all of that stuff, she passed away in 2014. And she said to me before she passed away, you have so much light in you and you need to give that light to other people and help other people. And my daughter at the time, my oldest, she's now 7.5, she was 2. And we were outside. I used to live in this duplex before I was able to buy this beautiful house. And we were outside, and the moon looked like a big, big beach ball. And she was running towards it. And she said, I'll go catch it. I'm gonna go get it. And I said to her, with that kind of attitude, you will catch it. And I'm gonna cry. And so my grandma passed, and that moment happened. I said, I'm gonna start an agency called Catch the Moon. So I created the agency and I signed a band called the Highfields. And maybe you'll hear from them at some point in this week, but they had never had a license, but they had so much heart, so much humility, and so much talent. And I said, you'll be the first people I sign, and I'm going to show you what I've done, and I'm going to help you and listen to your music. And I think you can do this. And they said, okay, let's give it a whirl. And you guys, they've made 6 figures a year since then. And I'm so proud of them. They've had so many licenses. It's been incredible. I remember the first license we got for them was like $48,000. And I called them. I'm like, you're going to do a T-Mobile spot. And it was a really cool song. They have a very different vibe than me. We just have different sounds. And they were just so stoked. And I just actually wrote an invoice for $31,500 for a documentary for a song they just did for doc. But we do all kinds of things, from Hulu trailers to movies to ads. And then from there, I started signing other artists. And then the next thing that happened was I was on the CD Baby podcast with Kevin Bruner, who's such a good guy, such a solid person. And I got all these people writing me emails after I was on that podcast. I guess they have a really big following. And this girl, Tiana, writes to me and says, you should start a course where you teach people what you're teaching the artists who get to work with you, because I don't live near you and I'd love to learn. And I said, oh, well, I've been helping so many artists in my network, in my community. Artists used to come to my house and bring me a coffee. And then I would sit down and tell them everything I knew. And she said, you should do it online. I was like, online course sounds, I don't know what you're talking about. You sound like you're saying Japanese words. Like, is this English? And she's like, yeah, you would just, create curriculum. And I'm like, no, I don't know. And then along came this girl, Chelsea Davis, and she said, I want to learn everything from you and I want you to mentor me. And can you create a course? And I said, well, I don't think so. And she said, what if I come to your house and like ask you all the right questions and you can just teach it to me and then we'll put it anyway. I started to teach. At first I just taught in my living room. I taught like 10 artists at a time. Then I started a workshop in town at a smaller theater. Then I started at a bigger theater. It started to do really well. I started to invite the music supervisors from Netflix and from the different ad agencies like Ogilvy and different studios like Paramount and Lionsgate. And I started to invite them to come and give feedback. And it just was so good. It was so fun and everyone liked it. So it just things that work, so it just started to work. And at that point, I was like still writing my own music, helping other artists. I built a team to help me. And then I started doing programs and courses. And we do have a full program. We have a 6-month program, which we're not going to talk about today, but we'll talk about it later in the week. But this challenge, you guys, like I'm not holding anything back. And you can ask people who've done it, like you're going to get a lot out of this. So this is free and you're going to love it. And so, yeah, I started the program and then I'm just mentioning the program because it's another good way for you to see how valid everything is, because we started the program and I met all these new artists and I thought, well, I wonder if I can have the same helping hand for them that I had for the Highfields. And what's amazing is, you know, we've had a few hundred people come through the program, and we just put together a list of the licenses that our students have had. And it's awesome. You know, there's probably over 100 licenses on there. So when people, you know, it's not for everyone. Not everyone is going to show up and do the work. Not everyone can sing, right? Not everyone is going to get over their excuses and get into action. Not everyone is going to commit to mastering their craft. Not everyone's going to be kind. So therefore people don't want to write with you, right? Like there's a lot of variables, but it's been amazing to see how many of our artists feel like this has changed their life and actually gotten them results. John Kleinville, who's now our director of music, was one of my students, and he's such a great person and now such a successful producer. I remember when he first got his first license and he was going to give up 6 months before that. I said, no, you're not. You're going to keep going. And then his first big license, which is such a great song. You guys have to hear some of these tracks. It was for a Starbucks ad. And he said, Kath, you don't know how much money I just made. I'm going to Europe. I got tears in my eyes and millions of people are going to hear my voice. And I can't thank you enough. And it's just like one teary day after another. And I have to say, last thing is, after all of that success, which would have been more than enough to just have helped one person, one of my students 3 years ago, Amy Loftus, she said, Kathy, you're so inspiring. You should start a podcast. I said, what's a podcast? And she said, you should start a podcast. And I said, all right, I'll start a podcast. She said, but it should be for all creatives, because every creative really wants to be more themselves and find a way to make a living. So I started a podcast called Don't Keep Your Day Job. And we started it in January of 2017. And in 2.5 years, we now have over 8 million downloads. I've interviewed incredible people, from Lisa Loeb to Howard Schultz, who created Starbucks, to Mandy Moore, to Jenna Fisher, to Bobby Brown, the makeup artist, to Jonathan Adler. And the show was voted by Apple #1 most inspiring podcast for 2019. And I just wrote a book, and it's called Don't Keep Your Day Job, to help people find their life's work, to help people find their purpose. And this comes out in November. So that's my story. That's my story. And now I want to talk about, I will leave time for some questions, but now I want to talk about what are the things that I really want you to know about what made it work. Okay. What are the things that makes a person successful? And what's really cool is I used to teach this, right? Like I would fly to Berkeley and Boston and teach, or I would teach at the Billboard Film and TV Conference or at the ASCAP Expo. I was doing that for years. And I had so much to say. But now what's even more special is, after interviewing 200 of the most successful entrepreneurs that I know exist, I've corroborated that the things that I know that worked for me is what works. This is what works, because everyone who's successful seems to say the same few things. And so we're going to talk about it. And then over the next 4 more days, we're going to go into detail. We're going to go into detail, right? Nitty gritty detail. So tomorrow we'll talk in detail about songs and lyrics. And one of the other days we'll talk in detail about the process and pitching and clearing, right? But today we really wanted to just like define what we're talking about. And so let's talk about some of the main things that made me successful, that make everyone successful. And by the way, thanks for hanging in there. I know I love you guys. When people were like, thanks for doing this, I'm like, I don't know if you can tell, I love doing this. When I started my podcast, I did it for free. Right now it does really well, but I just wanted to talk to people. So you're giving me so much. So thanks. And I know you could be doing a million things with your time. So thanks for being here. Okay. So here's what I learned. Number 1, there is always a way. There is always a way. Most of the time when you meet people who they complain about what they don't have, it means they've been hurt. They have feelings of inadequacy sometimes. And what that means is like, when we go to write music, or we go to write the screenplay, or we go to paint, or whatever our thing is, if we stopped, then we got our heart broken at some point, or there's something about the process that really intimidates us and makes us feel like we're not enough. So we actually want the excuse to stop. We want to say, well, there's no way it would ever work out, so I stopped writing. because when we sit down, unless we can create the most beautiful song like that, we have a hard time with ourselves. We give ourselves a really hard time. Most people don't allow the creative process to be the creative process. You know, Ed Sheeran talks about how when you write songs, he says it's sort of like going to that log cabin and you haven't been there for a few months and you turn the water on and it's what is it? It's like brown sludgy water. So you let the water run, and within 12 seconds, it's clear and you're fine. So he's like, that's art. I thought that was such a good metaphor. He's like, you have to let the brown sludgy water come out. Like, people are not born Mozart. People are not born Fred Astaire. They're not born, I said Michael Phelps before, they're not born that way. You create that, right? Through mastery, and you give yourself the gentleness to let your creativity be there every day. Diane Warren writes a song every day. So if she writes a song every day, she should have 365 times 25 number one singles. She doesn't, but she has tons of number one singles. I mean, I think she's the most, I think she's ASCAP's like highest achieving songwriter. I think her and David Foster, I think she's number one though. But what does that mean? It means that a lot of times I heard her say, I just do it to be flexing that muscle, right? And a lot of those days it's just, that's, song number 8 on the way to song number 50, which is the masterpiece, but I only got there because it's sort of like you find clues and you finish a song and you go, yeah, I really love the hook of this one, or I really love this one rhyme. Maybe I'll use that somewhere else, or just the muscle, letting yourself be creative. What happens is you gain mastery over your creativity, and you start to actually, that's why Ira Glass, who's another podcaster, says there's always a gap. He said, mind the gap, right? What's the gap? The gap is when you begin anything, you have great taste. So you can identify something that's brilliant. You can say, that's a brilliant song. That person's a great artist. But your ability in the beginning to create the same level of what you know is brilliant is not there yet. And that's the gap. And we have to push through that gap by continuing to create, and then give yourself a chance, like you're going to get there. So there is always a way, and we have to be resourceful. And so much of that comes from our mindset. But then there's some really important things that also help me here, which is, before I started writing music for licensing, this is maybe the biggest thing. Before I started writing music for film and TV, or before I started to make a real living, I just wrote songs, right? Like, I would just go to the studio and just get inspired. And then I would send those songs to a record label or whatever. And most songs, if you think about it, when people just write just to write, they're writing about breakups and they're writing about love, right? That's like the strongest, highest stake thing that most people write about. And I would just write. Here was a huge game changer for me. When I actually started to be successful, it was because I was thinking about what other people needed and finding a way to use my artistic voice to help them tell their story. And I think a lot of people get in their own way with this. I think that's why there's The Fountainhead is an amazing book by Ayn Rand. It's really about this. It's about two architects. One is like, I'm just an artist. I don't need anyone to be my patron. I don't need a client. I'm just going to make art. And the other one's like, oh, well, I do both, right? Like, I get hired as the architect, the artist, but I get this person to pay me because they value what I do. And this is a deep conversation that I have on my podcast all the time, because we really want to understand what this is about. So the thing is, there's a Japanese word that explains this really well. It's called the ikigai. And ikigai is where 3 things merge: something you love, something you're great at, and something that the world wants and needs. Okay? The truth is that I used to study at UCLA's Mindful Awareness Research Center, which was just fun. I just needed to learn to deal with anxiety, and I studied mindfulness, and it was just really helpful. And I'm still such a beginner at all that. But what we learned in the research, and I had this woman on my show, Emily Esfahani Smith, she has a TED Talk called Why Happiness is Overrated. And she talks about how what makes us happy is not really being happy. And this is what we talk about in the mindfulness world. And I'm going to get to why this matters for this topic. What actually makes a person happy, if I had the ability to see you guys all in a room right now, or to quickly read your comments faster, I'd ask you. But you could write it in if you want. What do you think it is that makes us really happy? What is it actually that we want in our life? What makes us feel fulfilled? So I recently had Jillian Michaels on my show and we were talking about this, and she said, yeah, it's not happiness, because happiness is it's not a place where you arrive and you're like, I'm happy, now I'm happy forever. You know, you check the box, you make this much money, you're married to this person, now you're happy forever. Like, that's not a thing, right? Not a thing. So what is it that we're after? Because we know we're going to have all the feelings in the world every day of the week. We have 70,000 thoughts a day and most of them are sad. So do the math. So what is it that we want? So what we want is actually, we want purpose and we want to contribute. We really, truly want to contribute. That's actually an incredible thing about our species, that what makes us happy, and this is what reason I brought up the mindfulness centers, because they did fMRIs where they studied people's brains, and people were more lit up when they did something for someone else than when they got something. Think about that. That's incredible that that's actually how we're designed. It's pretty awesome. So I think sometimes we just get in our own way. And essentially for years, I thought artists didn't give a crap about what other people needed and wanted. I thought that if you were truly an artist, you just made art. And I realized that that's not what I've seen. What I've seen is that artists feel other people's pain. They share other people's understandings, and they help tell stories that other people say, that helped me feel what I needed to feel, get through what I needed to get through. So successful people don't look for opportunities. They look to solve problems. How many of you know who Amanda Palmer is? So Amanda Palmer is an awesome artist. She's awesome. She used to be in Dresden Dolls. She has an incredible TED Talk, and she was on my podcast, and we talked a lot about this. And she said, you know what, Kathy, you know what works for me? Because she was dropped from a label, and she makes, just from her Patreon, she makes about $55,000 a month. And we talked about how that happens and why. And she said, every time I do a show, I sit at the merch table and I don't leave until the last person is done. And I listen to their life. I ask them how they are. And I listen to them tell me that their mom just got through cancer and this song helped them. And I listen to them tell me that they're really struggling to find their identity. And I listen to them tell me their life story. And she said, and then when I go to write my next record, I take all those stories and all of that pain, I take it with me to the piano, and then I write. So people don't really get it sometimes, right? I think that for any business, whether you're making cheesecake, you're creating an app, you're starting a coffee shop, most people do business completely backwards. They're in their own mind. We're self-absorbed. That's okay. We're all a little self-absorbed. And we create an idea and then we just shove it at people and try to get them to like it. And then we're like, business is so hard. You got to force people to like things. And sometimes they don't like it. And I guess that means you're never going to be successful. And it really needs to be the opposite, right? It really needs to be not being self-absorbed. It needs to be starting with, what experience do people want? What's the number one need every human being has? What is the number one need? It's to be seen. Everyone wants to be seen. So when we make empathy the core of our business, we become successful. And if you learn nothing else from this whole 5 days, take that. It's empathy. It's empathy. It's empathy that allows you then to know how to get out of yourself and use your art and your perspective and your creativity to tell a story that's going to feed someone else's soul. That's the job. Okay. That's why Sara Bareilles can write this show called Waitress. And this show, I don't know how many of you have seen Waitress. It's awesome. This Broadway show she wrote. She doesn't know what it's, she's not a mother yet, right? The character in the play is a woman who's abused. And then at the end, she has this big redemption because she has a child and she starts to get herself together for the sake of this child. Now, every single song in that show is stunning. There's one called Everything Changes that I lose it every time I hear it. So is Sara Bareilles a sellout because she wrote music that the director and producer asked her to write? Ask yourself that. Randy Newman, Alan Menken, John Williams, any person who's ever stopped to think about what their client might want, does that make them a sellout? Or does that make them very smart at understanding other human beings and then using their abilities and genius and creativity to serve the world And isn't it really that what we want is to serve other people? Because the answer is yes. So when you listen to these songs, like Everything Changes, which is the song she sings when she has this baby, she says, today's the day like any other, except everything's changed. I'm a mother in an instant. And who I was has disappeared. It doesn't matter. Now you're here. It was an amazing song. She was asked to write it, and it 100% sounds like her. Do you hear me? Do you really hear me? Okay. So when I was starting out, thank goodness, I saw indie artists that I respected and loved, whose songs were being licensed to TV shows, ads, trailers, film and TV, like Christina Perri. That song, 1,000 Years from Twilight, that's a license, right? Ingrid Michaelson, Old Navy ad, her song about Rogaine, all the songs from Grey's Anatomy. They use so many indie artists. The Lumineers, I belong with you and you belong with me. That was a song that was licensed to a show called Heart of Dixie. American authors. So many artists that I believe in, whose music is real music. So our job is to realize that there's a difference between a hobby and a business, okay? A hobby means you can just do you. Do it on your own time. Enjoy it. A business is all empathy. A business is radical empathy. A successful business is radical empathy because it means I've taken the time to figure out that ikigai, what I love doing, that I'm good at, that the world wants and needs. So that was my biggest change. And so when I started writing music for licensing, I started asking the question, what's the story that this show is telling? What song would they need? Oh, they need a song about shelter. They need a song about being there for someone. I'm going to write a song called Count on Me. Oh, they need a song about being an original. I feel like that comes up a lot. And then I ask myself as Kathy, what's my story there? Where's the overlap? And so like Count on Me, I wrote that song. It was licensed a bunch. It was licensed to an ad. It was licensed to Switched at Birth. It was licensed to a show called Body of Proof. And I wrote that song. I had just gone through 3 rounds of fertility treatment, and I was told you're probably not going to have a kid. And I had a surgery after the fertility treatment to try to change some stuff with my body. And the day after I wrote it, my friend Kyler came over to my house to bring me some soup, and we sat on the edge of my bed. And I said, let's write a song today for the baby that I'm going to have one day. I'm going to cry. And we wrote the song, and it was called Count on Me. And I did have that little kid. I have 3 kids now. Anyway, and that song was licensed. So the biggest thing to understand is the empathy. And the biggest thing is to understand that the empathy doesn't just stop at the songs you write. It continues. It's empathy for your co-writer and how we set that up. And I teach people, like, how do you get the most out of that session? It's empathy for your producer so that you get the best out of that experience. It's always beginning with the end in mind, thinking of what value you have to add and serving someone other than yourself. And by the way, when you do that, you don't get nervous, because it's not about proving yourself. It's not about being the best. It's about showing up in the room and being the person who cares the most. So my career really took off from that place, and I started to go out of my way to do what I told you before, to solve problems, to anticipate what people would need, to not wait around and just go. There were so many artists at the time who didn't get anything like that. They didn't get it. And they were people, you have to really be careful who you spend time with, right? Like, you want to spend time with people who have a high vibe, high vibration. And so a lot of artists, like I said, they've been hurt. I get it. They've gotten their hearts broken. And so they start just like pouring out excuses. The industry's dead. It's broken. It doesn't work. People are jerks. The gatekeepers will never listen to you. You send music, you never get your back. Forget it. It's awful. It did, like, all these things. That's just, garbage. And it's so easy to stand out when you come from a place of empathy and you're persistent and you're kind and you're humble and you work hard, and you don't have any of that in your way, and you just keep going to, like, how can I serve this person, right? So when I started reaching out to music supervisors, and that's a whole nother thing that we'll talk about in this 5 days, is like, how did I actually pitch? How did I actually get people to read the email? How did I get my songs through? And this is what I spend 6 months on, you guys, when I do my program, right? And not only in the program do we do all this, but we bring in music supervisors from ad agencies agencies and TV show networks and film studios to actually listen and give feedback. And then we also pitch songs as they start to get great, and we pitch them. And we'll talk about that later. But there's so much great stuff here. And the other beautiful thing about it is I want you to surround yourself with people who are not feeling sorry for themselves, because we either can have one thing or another. We can either have results or we can have excuses. You can't have both at the same time. You just can't. So doing your research, working hard, being a squeaky wheel, solving people's problems, taking directed action, it just changed everything for me. It changed everything. And from that place, I just got really good at working smarter instead of harder. I think a lot of artists work so hard. They're like busking on 3rd Street Promenade. They're touring around the country to rooms of like 12 in Missouri. And it's hard. And it doesn't surprise me then that they hate it, right? They're just like, forget it. You can't make a living. Right. So what's beautiful is that we live in a time where music supervisors are still happy. They're still happy to pay indie artists really well for their songs and TV shows and ads. And ads pay usually the best. I'll tell you why. So when you license a song, let's say you license a song to a TV show. Well, a TV show might have, let's say, 22 episodes, 23 episodes in a season, and they get a budget for all music, for all episodes, and that's what the budget they have. So let's say the director comes over and says, I really want to use a U2 song in the 8th episode. I just remember Ross and Rachel when they finally kissed for the first time and they play With or Without You. You know, remember he's like, I didn't get a cat. Do you remember that episode? I love Friends. Anyway, so they use this U2 song, With or Without You, right? So that cost them money. It cost them a lot of money. So what the supervisor then has to do is say, okay, well, I have 22 episodes. Every episode has like 3 or 4 song needs. And I know I'm spending all of this money on episode 8, which leaves me the rest of the budget for everything else. So TV is going to pay you less. An ad, Dr. Pepper might be like, okay, we're doing a few regional spots, but we're doing one huge national ad every 6 months. So we have more money because we have one song in the ad. Do you get it? So ads can pay, like we've done, we've done $70,000 on ads, where TV, the most I've ever made on a TV is like 10 grand. But then a lot of times other than that, it's like 5. And then for trailers, pretty good. Trailers could be, we just had an artist do a trailer. One of our students, she got $27,000. Really nice. End title for movies are great. We had an artist get 100 grand for an end title. Great song, really beautiful songs. And the other thing I learned, you guys, when I did this empathy, when I did this thinking about who I was writing for, is I realized the difference in songs that were, what was different between ad songs and TV songs. And so we're going to talk about that tomorrow. Tomorrow, we're going to go into details, and I'm going to talk about what are the kinds of songs that music supervisors look for in TV, ads, films, trailers, and how are they different, and how can we understand that? Because again, if we want to be successful, we have to anticipate people's needs, right? We have to be ahead of the game, and we have to figure out how to make beautiful work that we feel proud of. Like my kids and I, because they watch all these Disney movies, they know Randy Newman, right? So Randy Newman has always been somebody who I loved even before I had this particular career. And so many of those songs from Toy Story are like the best songs. And those are songs he wrote for a project. And I know now what that's like, which is really cool, because I've written songs for movies where they let me come into an editing bay and watch the whole movie by myself on the lot in my own little theater. And they say, watch the whole movie and then go home and then write us a song, right? So I've learned what that feels like. And there's something so awesome about having that inspiration. In fact, it's so much easier for me to write when someone gives me something to be inspired by. And there's never a time where I don't feel like it's me. All the songs that I've written, even the songs that have been used in McDonald's, I love those songs. I perform those songs. And that's how it should be. And so we'll talk about that also over the next few days. And I'll have you do some research, and I'll have you look up really cool artists, and you'll go, she's right, they're not jingles. I didn't realize that all these awesome human beings are the ones licensing songs. And so what we're going to talk about is, how do you find that sweet spot? How do you stay true to yourself? Because they have to have that. they're not hiring you because you're just going to make something that sounds like it's cookie cutter. Otherwise, they wouldn't hire you. They would just have someone on their staff write a song and put the word sunshine in and clap their hands. They don't want that. So you have to be an artist. And then you have to figure out how to make sure that you tell a story that they're telling. Because for licensing, one more thing I want you to know, the main thing when you license a song to an ad or TV show, a trailer, a film, you're cutting a song to picture, which means you're now telling a story. And what story are you telling? That's a really big point here. So we're going to talk over the next few days about the most common themes that come up. And it goes back to that empathy. But we want to understand the story that we're telling, and then not just in lyrical form, but in the soundscape, in the instrumentation, what would work for that? You know, like a Philip Phillips song, that song, Home, it's been licensed so many times because that theme of home, that's so universal. And then the instrumentation of it is so beautiful. And just the breakdown section, na, 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 you know, sound, we're gonna talk about why that works so well. But there's certain songs that would work better for a trailer or a film than they would for an ad, instrumentation wise. We're gonna talk about that. We're gonna talk about the different kinds of words that they wanna hear. And then you're gonna look back on these 5 days and you're gonna go, it makes a lot of sense. It's not jingles. It's just helping tell stories. That's our job. Like, our job is to get out of the way, be humble, and get to use our art to help tell a story that everybody wants to hear, that everybody needs to hear. And the truth is that like I said, in any profession, you know, even if you were a touring artist, when I was at the label, they're like, here's what we've done testing wise. This is what makes a good single. Write a song about this, right? Remember Sarah Bareilles, I'm not going to write you a love song. Like, you always have someone at the end. If it's a business, you need to care about what people want. And that's, again, what Amanda Palmer said. She's like, I care about my audience. I care. And what do people want? They want to be seen. So we're going to talk about how that plays into the way that you work, not only in your actual creativity, but in your business, because this is not a hobby and you need to be the CEO of this business, and you need to think about how you're pitching, and the fact that the people you're pitching to, they have lives and kids and a big job to do and a dog that has to go to the vet. And we need to talk to them in a way where we're not entitled, but where we're really there to serve them and treat them like human beings. So that's my story for today. And we're going to get into some more specifics tomorrow. So I'll tell you what we can expect to happen at the end of every day. So after we do this live every day, you're going to get an email, and in the email, you're going to get a homework assignment, right? And I figure, like, as long as you're here, you may as well get the most out of it, because you may just discover something cool. So in today's homework assignment, we're going to ask you some questions like, what did you want to get out of this challenge? What have been the obstacles for you as a songwriter? What's in the way? What do you really want? Why do you want it? Like, why do you want this life as an artist? Why do you want to be able to make $300,000, $400,000 a year with your music? Why? Like, what do you want that? We're going to ask you those questions. So every day you'll get a different question. And some of the other days it's going to be more specific. Like, we're going to ask you to go research and find a couple examples of songs that have worked. And it's going to be fun. And you're going to start to do the Cathy Heller approach and start to actually do some of the steps so that you can start to feel what you're going to discover and how that's going to affect your process. So I wanted to just tell you, like, today with this homework assignment, I would love to read your answers. So we're going to invite you to post your answers in the group. And I think it would just create a really beautiful, meaningful environment if we all share and create that safe space for each other to just, like, work through this. Because you guys, this is high stakes, right? Like, what we're talking about, we're not just talking about how to make money. If you really wanted to make money and that's all you cared about, you shouldn't be here. You should just go learn real estate. You should go work at a hedge fund. Right? But if you want meaning and you want to get to feel like you're being yourself, then the stakes are really high. Then what we're talking about is not just licensing your songs to film and TV. We're talking about figuring out a way for you to make money so that you can just be an artist full time. And that's what it did for me. And what it allowed me to do is thinking about creating a business out of this and writing these kinds of songs and caring about the people who needed these songs and writing the songs that they needed allowed me then in my downtime to just sometimes write 3 songs that I just wanted to write, because I didn't have to do anything else other than be an artist. And it allowed me to like start a podcast, which was a passion project. And like that grew into a whole nother thing. And that also, my success from the podcast is all empathy, right? It's like I cared about my listener. I know that they're in pain. I want to help them. I created something for free. A lot of this also is like, get to work. You know, a lot of people, the biggest reason I see that people don't have what they want is because they talk a lot about what they don't have and they don't do anything. And the second reason is there's some people who really do want to do, they're doers, they just don't know what to do. And that's where you guys are coming in, and that's why you're here, because I'm going to show you what to do. So I had so much fun today, and I'm going to just look through. Tell me in the comments how you're feeling right now. Are you feeling excited, inspired, overwhelmed, confused, lit up? Tell me how you feel right now. I'd love to hear. And I'm just so excited to spend the next few days with you guys. If you want, by the way, my podcast is free. If you want to check out that Amanda Palmer episode, it's a really good one. It's from a few months ago. You can find my podcast everywhere. You can find it on Stitcher, Spotify, Apple Podcasts is the best. I love them. But yeah, you could listen to that one. It's a really good one. Also, Lisa Loeb's episode was really good. It's just fun to listen to other artists who totally get it. So I'm just going to read your comments right now. If anyone has any like, oh, cool. Awesome. I'm so glad you guys are feeling inspired and validated. Yes. Thank you for your kind words. And oh, that's so awesome. June's like, I love your podcast. Awesome. Yes. I think CD Baby did list my episode as like top 10. That's so cool. Yeah. So it's going to be, yeah, you guys, this is not a 1 hour one and done. Like you've got me for 5 days. I'm going to be here. So tomorrow is exciting. We're going to get into some nitty gritty. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about the specifics and what makes the difference between ads, TV, film. What are the different lyrics? What are people looking for? I'll be giving you some of those common themes, and I will be sharing with you some case studies too. Like I'll share with you, these are a couple searches that we got in, and these are the kinds of things that they were asking for. And these are the kinds of songs that are really cool right now. And these are the kinds of songs that our artists actually got licensed. And so you can start to listen and go, oh, there really is a range. And that song's really cool. And it's not a jingle. So we'll be playing those, and I'll be dropping links to those in the chat. And does anyone have any like big questions right now? I want to leave a few minutes for questions. I'm happy to answer a few questions. Angela, oh, Mikey, you're so sweet. Angela, if you have any questions, you could also, if you saw any questions before, you can also put them in the chat. But I just went all the way down to the bottom of the chat. I'm going to read the other comments later. So those of you who are feeling like, oh my gosh, this is 5 days and I have a life and kids and a day job and I'm not going to be able to make it, don't worry. Make sure that you watch the replay. But I will tell you, in my life, there is something so magical about being live. Like there are moments where I was live somewhere in the room where someone said something, and it's so different than like watching it on a replay. So if you can be here, I really encourage you to be here live, because I think it makes a difference. I'm just looking. Thank you for all of your really kind comments. It means a lot to me, you guys. Like I'm just still that girl who wasn't cool in 7th grade. So to see you guys feeling like this was valuable, it really means a lot to me. And thank you for taking your time. Most of you didn't know who I was, and you showed up, and I really appreciate it. So just to make it clear, because someone just said, what time is it tomorrow? Just so it was super simple, every single day this week for the 5 days, we go live at noon Pacific Standard Time. So we will be here noon Pacific Standard Time every day this week, and then we will send you the replay later on. But I really hope that you guys do get to check it out live, because I think it's such a game changer. And okay, just looking for any other questions. Looking through any other questions. I'm just looking through. Oh, Kirsten said, what do you mean it's not a jingle? Oh, because people sometimes think, there's a lot of myths. I talked about this in the beginning of the chat today. People sometimes think that when you license music, you write these like 30-second jingles. And I think that some people maybe still do that, but that's not licensing. That's maybe music houses, music composition. Maybe there's things called mnemonic, which is like, NBC, ding, ding, ding. That's a mnemonic, right? Like licensed music, what we do, and this is what we do, is we write full-length songs. Like, we are artists who write songs, and then we pitch those songs to people who choose music for film, TV, trailers, ads. And then when they use that song for a use, they sometimes decide to drop out the vocal, right? Because maybe there's a lot of dialogue, or sometimes they feature the vocal, or sometimes they drop the vocal out for the first half of the song, but then they put it back in. So that's what I meant. It's not a jingle, it's a full song. It's a full 2 to 3 minute full song. So Lindsay said, how can I be sure I'm getting a fair rate percentage? You have an opportunity to write with a record label. So that's a good question. And we can talk later on. Like, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not really allowed to give like legal advice, but we can talk in generalities about what really I think is good to do as an artist and what I would try to stay away from. And as far as you percentage with a record label, I don't know what you mean in terms of you being signed. You mean in terms of them repping your licensing? I'm a big fan of people not taking your publishing. We don't do that with our artists. I'm a big fan of people taking whatever is the fairest rate, just to get you the license and then get out of there, not taking a piece of your royalties or your publishing. I know that people sometimes do that. That's not my thing. How does a singer-songwriter composer pitch a song to a record label producer without being a producer? So that's a good question. For the purpose of this 5 days, we're going to talk about how you would pitch to somebody choosing music for a film, a TV show, an ad. And by the way, for those of you who heard my story, I just think it's such a better way to go. Like, let me just be clear. Having been dropped from the label, now looking back, was the best thing, because, and I'm not just saying that, because now licensing music eventually went on to make me a career where I was making $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year. And I got to do me. I didn't have to work. Like, I didn't have to be in this sort of machine where I'm on tour all the time. My time is not mine. For some people though, they really do want to get signed to a label. And I totally get that. I could dig that. I just have 3 kids. And for me, this just allowed me to have a great life doing stuff that I loved. And it gave me my life. Right. So we're going to talk, just to answer your question, I don't really talk about that, like how to get your signed to a record label, but we're going to talk about how to get your music signed to a licensing agent. We're going to talk about how to get your music in the hands of a music supervisor who's going to pitch it, for their TV show. We're going to talk about how to get your song in the hands of ad agencies, trailer companies, film companies. Like, that's what we're going to talk about, and we're going to talk about it in detail. Thank you for your thanks, you guys. You're so sweet. I feel so grateful. This is, you guys are proof of how good human beings are, because so often, again, limiting beliefs and generality, people will be like, the internet's horrible. I would never do anything. I would never show up and be vulnerable because people are awful. No, they're not. Like, look, I don't know most of you. And like, there's such kindness. People, for every one person who's annoying or rude or self-involved or nasty, there's like 1,000 good people. Like, we never talk about that at the end of every day. We're never like, God, most of the people I met today at Starbucks and at work, and they're so kind, so nice. No, we talk about that one person who was who like ran the light or didn't let us get the parking spot. It's just such garbage. Like, but thank you. You guys remind me of why I do this, and I feel so grateful. Just looking for other questions. Is it a good idea to still go through ASCAP BMI for licensing? Yeah, totally. We're going to get into some of that granular business stuff later in the week, but I'm glad you asked that. It's a fair question. Yeah, so BMI and ASCAP are great because they're going to make sure you get your royalties, right? So you want them. They're not going to, that's not a label, right? That's your PRO. That's going to make sure you get your performance royalties, which is really helpful. So yeah, before you pitch your song, you just make sure that you make sure that song is registered, right, at your CSAC, BMI, VRA, ASCAP. I love ASCAP, but whatever it is, it works. And they just make sure they're collecting royalties for you. So that's another fun thing about licensing, right? Like, you might get a licensing fee of 70 grand for an ad, which we've done. And then the ad plays, and then you get your royalties, right? Every time the ad plays. But not only do you get your songwriter royalties, often if the ad or the TV show or the film, let's say it's a SAG thing, which normally it's Screen Actors Guild, it has to be union, you can then get SAG royalties for singing in it. So you get 2 kinds of royalties, so it can add up pretty nicely. So it's really cool. I'm just looking through, God, the questions are coming fast and furious. Is it okay to do full songs with no lyrics? Yeah, so instrumentals are licensed all the time. And then I would say, you may as well do both, I think. And I personally, since I'm a singer-songwriter, I would do both. But yeah, instrumental stuff happens all the time. Do you pitch demo quality material? No, we don't. We're going to talk about how to get resourceful. And remember I said there's always a way. How do you get radio edit ready, awesome songs done? We're going to talk about that. And that has to do with, again, remember I said it's always thinking, what can I add? What value add do I have? So one reason I love the program that we created, and artists who've been in my program can attest to this by far, is like, you want to collaborate. Starving artists don't do that. Thriving artists do. You want to find someone who Henry Ford used to say, people would say, how do you build the best car in the world? Not that he does anymore, but I remember this quote. And he said, I just know the right button to push to get the person I need, right? So it's about collaborating. You don't have to be the person who is the best at every aspect of it, but you should find a person. If you're a great songwriter, find a great producer. If you're a great top liner, find a great person who makes tracks. If you're a great person who writes lyrics, find a melody. All those things. I know people who are great songwriters, but they don't sing the song they write. I remember at the ASCAP Pop Awards about, I don't know, I guess 8 years ago or so, two guys wrote the song Before He Cheats for Carrie Underwood, and they got up and sang it. It was so good. And they wrote it, and they knew a woman was going to sing it. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes you're writing a song, and even for me, sometimes I write songs and I don't think my voice is the right voice, depending on what the project's for. So we need to collaborate, and we'll talk about how you can make sure that stuff gets done. But yeah, we need to anticipate people's problems, right? It's nobody's job to hand us anything. It's our job to get empowered and excited and show up and solve their problem and give them no reason not to see us as a standout. And let me tell you, it takes so little to stand out in this world, because most people, A, give up too soon, and B, they look for favors instead of looking for how they can help. And so you quickly can stand out, and we'll talk about how you can get that done. Gosh, so many good comments, so much good feedback. What's the format used? Not MP3, right? No, so we would use MP3s. WAV files are great. So eventually, if you get the spot, right, if they say, we want to license this, they need a WAV track or AIF. They also need the stems. And the stems would be like in a Pro Tools session, you'll see like vocal, drums, hi-hat, maybe they wouldn't break up the drums into every part of the drum like snare, but they probably do. But I'm not a producer, can you tell? But all the tracks from Pro Tools, so that would be called the stems, right? Each one of those, and you'd have that later on. But the first thing you just need is an MP3 that you upload to a streaming link. Remember, never send somebody like an MP3 the attachment, because they'll just delete it. It just clogs up their inbox. So again, anticipating their needs, having that empathy, thinking about how to solve problems as opposed to asking for more, right? So we would send a streaming link, and we like something that's called Disco, but you could use Dropbox, Box, whatever. But Disco is great. And all you need at first when you're sending in a pitch is a link to an MP3. And then you need to know that you have, in case they need it, a WAV file, an instrumental, and an AIF if it's not a WAV, and all the stems and all that stuff. Yes, the live stream is going to be up here. So that's the answer to that. Can we pitch lyrics only, or do we need a recorded song? Yeah, so we don't pitch lyrics, right? So we just look for recorded music, and we're going to talk about how to make that happen. We're going to talk about the whole songwriting process one of the days of these 5, and I'm going to show you how to set it up so that you feel finally you're more in control. And it's not like, I think I'll end with this. I feel like a lot of times artists are waiting. They're just waiting. They're waiting for their big break. They're waiting for the fairy art mother. My friend Andy J. Pizza says, he has a show called Creative Empire. He's like, people are just waiting for this like fairy art mother. And it's so true. And what I've learned, Jenna Fisher talked about this when she was on my podcast. She played Pam on The Office. She's like, the people I know who have careers, they don't wait. They go make stuff, right? We get it done. And we're going to talk about how you can think about and start taking action, and what are the ways to work smart, because you don't need to work all day on this. I actually think it's a good idea to have a day job and do this on the side, because if you didn't, you'd be overwhelmed and you'd burn out, you'd flame out, and you'd be done. There's actually probably 90 minutes of work max that you can do to move your business forward every day. We're going to talk about what that is, and how to structure it, and how to know what action to take so that you can complete the things that you want to complete. And what are those things? How do you write the right songs? How do you get them to the right people? That's what we're going to talk about over the next 5 days. So we've got a little time to do that. Can you license a song more than once? Great question. So we'll talk about that more. I'm glad you asked it. We'll talk about that more when we talk about the business side. Yes, that's the beauty of a license, right? When someone licenses your song, that's a license is the right to use it. So depending on the contract, some contracts say that this person who's licensing it gets the exclusive right to use it for 3 months. Sometimes it says the exclusivity is 3 months, but just for car commercials, but you could still license it to a food commercial or shoe commercial, right? But the exclusivity has a shelf life, and it's usually just per genre. So yeah, I've licensed many of the songs that I've done really well with have been licensed multiple times to different projects, film, TV, trailers, ads. Yes, that's what I love about it. I don't have to sell my publishing. I don't have to give people ownership. That's not what licensing is. Isn't that cool? It is really cool. Can you license a song with more than one company? So if you mean, can you have different licensing agents pitching your songs? You can. We'll talk about the best way to make that work. And if the answer is, if you were looking for like, can different brands license your song? Yes, absolutely. And we're going to talk about, like I just said, how to just make sure that you understand what the terms are of these deals. You guys are so sweet. I feel really blessed to have met all of you. All right. Well, this was awesome. Oh, so many good questions. Before sending the stem, should we copyright the song with the Library of Congress? I think it's great to copyright songs. Yeah, I think it's great, but you don't have to. A couple of things about copywriting is register the song with your PRO, BMI, ASCAP. And yeah, there's easy ways now to copyright things online. And I've also heard from friends that Pro Tools, when you're recording something, there's a date now, right? There's a paper trail of when it was recorded. So God forbid somebody claim the right to it. They'd have to prove that they have a session. There was a digital file with a date that precedes yours. And so that's good to know, to fall back on. Like it's all dated, right? So if it ever came to that, you'd be like, okay, but here's my session with the same melody and lyrics. Where's yours? Like I have the paper trail dated November 1st and yours doesn't come. You have something like the next year in May, like this is my song, but always good to copyright. You guys, I could do this all day. I love doing this. So we are going to talk so much more. We're going to have 5 whole days together. I hope you guys had fun today. I had a great time. Be sure to check your email so that you can do your homework. And I will see you guys tomorrow at noon Pacific Standard Time. And I just think that you guys deserve it. And I'm glad that you're here, and I can't wait to get to know you better. So thanks for showing up today. I'll see you tomorrow, noon Pacific Standard Time, and we will have so many more days to really flesh this out. Tomorrow, we're going to get nitty-gritty, more specific, and it's going to be fun. So thanks for being here, and have an awesome week.